Gilgamesh has just arrived after an ordeal in some very dark caves. He looks like a mess. His body hair is literally so overgrown and unwashed that it is matted. Like, he has a rat's nest in his body hair, and he is just dressed in nothing but the raw lion skins from the lions that he killed with his bare hands. Tablet 10 and 11. The conclusion. Gilgamesh looks like a mess. He's wandering, probably more like stumbling, through the Garden of the Gods. He hasn't slept in days. He is very visibly depressed. He is like the hottest dude on earth, and yet now he looks rough after all of this. Someone is watching him, and the person watching him is called Shiduri, who is a bartender. She keeps a tavern or an inn. I don't know which one it is, 5,000-year-old translation. She keeps this inn by the seashore next to the Garden of the Gods. To get here, as Gilgamesh has, you've had to cross through all of these trials, that super dark cave that takes a full day at least to walk through, and that's at Gilgamesh speed. That's probably not a great way to establish a customer base. So she is probably not just some random innkeeper. She is involved in like every version that we know of, but this one is the only one that gives her a name. Usually she's just unnamed, but when she does have the name, it's accompanied by the Tingir sign, which in cuneiform is used to either just be the name of the sky god, but also when a name or a noun in cuneiform is accompanied by this Tingir sign, it kind of looks like an asterisk, but bigger. It indicates that this is the name of a deity. And also Shiduri probably was, I think, a Babylonian deity, but it means young woman in Hurrian. Some people believe her to be an aspect of Ishtar, but probably not this particular incarnation of Shiduri. But I think she is also like the Babylonian goddess of beer and stuff. And beer was very important, okay? Beer might literally have been the reason that humans settled down in one place at all. It's not about bread. Humans wanted to brew beer. Are you surprised? I am not. So she's watching. She sees Gilgamesh like stumble into and out of the Garden of the Gods. He looks like a mess. He's a big dude. And she is like, I know I'm a goddess, but this dude kind of looks dangerous. Like, clearly he is running from something. It very well may be his murderous crimes. So she locks the door. She's like, how did he even get out here? She bolts the door and goes up on the roof. Gilgamesh, though, sees her do this, and he kind of freaks out. I mean, he clearly is not doing well mentally and emotionally, and he just kind of loses it at this. And his reaction really does not help show that he is not just a murderer, but he goes up to her door and yells like, hey, why did you lock the door as soon as you saw me? I watched you lock the door. I watched you go up on the roof. What did you see? Do you think I'm scary? Let me in, or I will smash this door down myself. I am Gilgamesh. My friend Enkidu and I killed Humbaba in the forest of cedar, we slew lions in the mountain passes, and then we slaughtered the bull of heaven itself. I will smash this door down. Shiduri's actual response is largely lost, but if not intimidating, I think at least these claims pique her curiosity. And he's saying he's gonna smash the door down anyway, so she goes back downstairs and she is like, hello. If you have done such great deeds, why do you look so terrible? You're wrapped in animal skins. You're somehow both frostbitten and sunburned. And honestly, you just look super depressed. If you have truly beaten all of those monsters, why do you look like you've been wandering in the wilderness? And Gilgamesh is like, I have been wandering in the wilderness. Why shouldn't I look terrible? Why shouldn't I look sad? My friend Enkidu, quote, panther of the wilderness, whom I loved so dear, who with me went through every danger, went the way of all mortals. He died. Gilgamesh goes on, I wept over him for 7 days and nights, hoping that somehow he would hear and return to me. I wouldn't even let anyone bury him until he literally started to rot in his deathbed. A maggot fell out of his nose. That seems to have been the catalyst for Gilgamesh being like, yeah, I should probably give him up for burial. Bro, he was clearly extremely devastated. He keeps going. I couldn't bear losing him. I couldn't bear that I must someday face the same end. So I just left. And now I wander the wilderness, searching for a way to avoid death. How can I stay quiet when someone I loved so much is gone, and someday I will lie down forever just like him. It is really interesting to see, like, the mood shift here for Gilgamesh, because if you've been here before the whole, like, Enkidu died, he is, for better or worse, the most confident man ever. This, though, since his whole breakdown, this seems to be kind of the first humanoid contact he's had in a while. Like, he talked to the scorpion dudes, but I don't know, it didn't seem like he wanted to vent for them. Like, until Enkidu died, he was the king of Uruk. The king of kings. He was the fiercest and strongest warrior ever to live. Homeboy confidently went to the cedar forest to kill the unkillable monster. Just cause he wanted to. I don't think it was even really in an attempt to cheer up Enkidu. I think he was just like, oh, I want to do this, cause Enkidu didn't. And now he is exhausted and sore and dirty and still full of grief and anxiety that are tearing him apart inside, and it probably seems like they'll never get better. I don't think he has a lot of experience coping with these feelings. He's always gotten what he wanted. He's like Cusco.
He was born and raised to rule. No one has ever been this cool.
But buffer. He just unloads all of these feelings to Shidori, which, isn't that like stereotypically a bartender thing anyway? I don't know. Anyway. I mean, he already has several wives, so maybe. Anyway. He just confesses all this stuff to the bartender, even that he literally kept his friend's corpse until it started decomposing, delaying the very culturally important funeral rites for Enkidu. He just couldn't handle losing him. Man, you think this is the one dude that will not die easy, and then he does. And it's your fault. Probably not been having a good time wandering in the wilderness. Sometimes, though, like, people do extreme things because of grief. People have been known to hallucinate or experience breaks with reality after the loss of a loved one. It can be a very powerful thing. So I know that I have been kind of telling off Gilgamesh, and I still stand by all of my statements about all of the things that he really should not have done. But clearly, he is at his lowest point that he's ever been. I can't help but feel bad for him. Did he do stupid stuff? Yes. But man, he's hurting. Like, it was his fault. On a whim, he went to kill this giant that led to them defeating it, but then killing the Bull of Heaven, and then Enkidu died because they killed the Bull of Heaven. If he had listened to Enkidu, who was like, this is a bad idea, Enkidu would probably still be alive. I imagine that's what's been running through his head through all of this time wandering alone in the wilderness. I hope, though, that after confessing all this, he feels a little bit better. So this next scene, both of the translations that I primarily used were missing it, but while I was researching, because, you know, this story is fragmented, it's 5,000 years old, we don't have all the pieces. And so the wonderful translators have tried to fill things in, and I have also tried to fill things in. But I kind of stumbled upon this particular fragment of the story from the Old Babylonian version, which is like a way older version than most of the tablets that we've been using the translation from. So in this particular version, Shiduri is left unnamed, but we know her name, okay? But they do, in this particular fragment, they have a longer conversation. I found it in like this academic paper that was just 10 pages of a dude analyzing this scene. So shout out to him. It was like in honor of his professor that he'd lost, and it gave me feelings. Anyway, Shiduri listens to all of this, and she, I'm sure, knows that he has been ruminating on all of this throughout his wanderings, and I'm sure he still has the big sad boy eyes. Like, he may look like an absolute mess, but I'm sure he knows how to do the sad boy eyes. I feel it in my heart. Anyway, and she is kind, but she is realistic. Gilgamesh, she says, you won't find a cure for death. When the gods created humans, they also established that all of them will someday die. But that knowledge doesn't mean that you should live your life in fear. Life is precious because it ends. So instead, live it to the fullest. She names off some cool stuff that he can do. Wear clean and comfortable clothes instead of scavenged animal skins. Eat your fill of good food. Celebrate every single day that you live. Look at your children, hold their little hands. Cherish your loved ones in the time you do have. Her focus on celebrating life might be a parallel to the funerary rituals that Gilgamesh was putting off. Last time we discussed how those very practices were meant to help the spirit of the deceased kind of let go and transition into the journey to the afterlife. And they also had that period of mourning and encouraging. Like, it showed respect to the dead. You were supposed to dramatically mourn. Encouraging the bereaved to express their grief visibly, publicly, dramatically. Like, people would just scream, cry, and tear their hair out, and this was viewed as a sign of their devotion. And now I'm not saying we should tear our hair out, like let's not hurt our bodies, but losing someone hurts. And I think as weird as these rituals may seem to us today, like people joke about hired mourners, that's a real thing. People would be hired to like appear to grieve at a funeral. I don't know if I should say appear, maybe they really did, maybe they were just super empathetic, but who knows? They're all dead. This was 5,000 years ago. I think though, that on some level these were healthy. This encouragement to express your feelings, to let them out very visibly and dramatically. Maybe not everyone wants to process their feelings that way, and that's okay. But like, to be encouraged to scream out your feelings where everyone can see, where your loved ones might be mourning right along with you. So you're supported and you are not alone in the very intense emotions that loss can bring on. This period where people were encouraged to be really sad about it. Dress in black. Let everyone know that you're hurting, because it does hurt. The idea that, like, if we are hurting, we should be quiet about it, not bother anyone else, and just deal with it. This is like the opposite. Let there be public and visible grief with other people. You're not alone in your sorrow. If you express your emotions differently, safely, that's okay. But I can't help but wonder if we as a society would have better emotional health if we did have like this prescribed period of mourning after a major loss in your life. If for a while we could just be like, yeah, I'm really sad. I don't care who knows it. I'm hurting. I need support. And for everyone to just be like, yeah, man, that sucks. I can see that you are hurting and I'm sorry. I don't know if it's as simple as that, but there's so much pressure, like, go back to work as soon as possible. Be quiet. Don't bother anyone else about it. And I don't know. I just am an advocate for expressing your emotions when you need to, in an appropriate and safe way, but expressing your emotions when you need to. So this whole concept of like mourning and the funeral rites were really interesting to me. Anyway, so she is focusing on like celebrating life, enjoying the nice things that we have now while we're alive, because the ancient Mesopotamians believed that the afterlife kind of sucked. Like, it wasn't hell. It's not like eternal torment. But for most people, it was just kind of gray and boring and empty. Shiduri's advice doesn't really seem to resonate with Gilgamesh, and he just demands that she tell him where to find Uta-napishtim, that he will cross any ocean, and if he cannot find him, he will just go back out and wander the wilderness forever. Now, Uta-napishtim, we'll get into his story in a bit. Shiduri tells him that no one can cross the ocean but Shamash, the sun god, because the journey is so dangerous. And even if he could cross it, partway through he'll arrive at the waters of death. All I can think of is like the River of Souls in Hercules.
Well, it's a small underworld after all, huh?
But if he insists, he should go find Ur-Shanabi, Uta-napishtim's ferryman, in the woods. I guess he just hangs out there. If it is at all possible, Ur-Shanabi will take him across this ocean. Ur-Shanabi works for Uta-napishtim. I guess he just drives the boat. I don't know if he's like his chauffeur or whatever, but this fills Gilgamesh with determination, and he takes his axe and his dagger and rushes down to the forest. Doesn't even stop for a drink. Kind of a bummer. Like, you've been walking for days. You haven't slept in days or eaten properly. I mean, I'm sure he ate something, otherwise he would be dead, but like, the last time I remember, like, it's saying he ate something was when he killed the lions with his bare hands. So he takes his axe and his dagger and books it down to the forest where Shiduri said he would find Ur-Shanabi. Ur-Shanabi, quote, the sharp-eyed, hears him coming and goes to see what the noise is, but Gilgamesh just leaps out and pins into the ground. Gilgamesh is the dude who, it also says at a different point, he regularly wrestles 50-minute once and wins every time. He's 2/3 God, okay? So he's like, take me to Uta-napishtim. So he also, in the process of establishing dominance, damages Ur-Shanabi's boat pretty badly. And Ur-Shanabi is like, whoa, who are you? And Gilgamesh is like, I am Gilgamesh. I am the king of Uruk. And Ur-Shanabi, like Shiduri, asks, why do you look so terrible? He's like, you're wrapped in straight animal skins. You're somehow both frostbitten and sunburned, and honestly, you look really depressed. And Gilgamesh is like, yeah, I know, okay? And he, again, explains his journey. My best friend, with whom I killed both Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven, is dead. Why shouldn't I look terrible? I watched him die, and now I cannot stand the thought that someday I will lie down and never get up again, like he did. So now I'm wandering the wilderness in search of a way to prevent that. Just tell me where Uta-napishtim is. I don't care about the waters of death or the danger. Just tell me where he is, where I can find him. Because he is like the only human known to have become immortal from just being a human. So Gilgamesh is hoping that in getting his secret to immortality, he will also escape death. And Ur-Shanabi is like, well, you kind of screwed yourself over here because you broke my boat. So I cannot take you anywhere until we fix the boat. So instead of threatening me with that axe, why don't you use it to go chop down some wood so that we can mend the boat? I'm gonna need about 300 punting poles, which a punting pole is like an oar, but instead of pushing water with a flat thing to move the boat, a punting pole is used to move the boat by like pushing off of the bottom of the body of water. So if you're in a boat that's like in relatively shallow water, and I'm on this boat here, and this is the bottom of the lake, you push off the bottom of the lake to move the boat. And that's what a punting pole is. But he says they all should be the same length. He specifies a length. I would tell you, but both translations say slightly different things. Just kidding. We're going to do the math right now. So the George translation says 5 rods, which is 82.5 feet or a bit over 25 meters. The Kovacs translation says 60 cubits, which is about 90 feet or almost 27.5 meters. So both are actually pretty close, which from the numbers we have had in this story before, I'm really impressed. Because usually they're insane. So I just averaged them out. But those are still, like, not super realistic, which I'm not saying it has to be realistic, but sometimes the numbers are wild. Not as wild as Humbaba. But when I looked it up, the punting poles that I could find were available in lengths from like 6 feet to 18 feet, or 1.8 meters to 5.4 meters. I'm an American, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure everybody knows how long it is. So usually they're about like 5 meters or 16.5 feet. So these punting poles that Ur-Shanabi was like, make them this long, are more than 5 times the usual length of a modern punting pole. I'm not surprised, though, are you? Also, there is a type of bamboo called punting pole bamboo because apparently it, like, makes really good punting poles. Yeah, so, also, about some boats for ancient Mesopotamia. They did have boats pretty early on, like, by at least 5000 BCE, which Gilgamesh, if he was a real person, and long before this, would have lived around 2700 BCE, so they definitely had boats. And the Euphrates River has since shifted course since this story was written. But back then, the city of Uruk, the city that Gilgamesh is the king of, was actually like right on its banks. One boat that they found, I researched a bunch of ancient boat archaeology. One of them they found from like 2000 BCE was 23 feet or 7 meters long and 4.5 feet or 1.327 meters wide. So there's this kind of boat called a kufa, which I'm probably butchering. I don't speak Arabic. These were like these circular boats, kind of like coracles in Europe. It means basket. They're like giant waterproof baskets. And those kufas were in use right up until the 20th century. Like in the 1970s, everyone was finally getting cars, so they kind of fell out of use, but must be good boats. Basket boats. And the largest one that we know of from ancient times was around 18 feet in diameter. Also, our good professor and the greatest Assyriologist in the world, in my opinion, Irving Finkel, did build a replica with materials that would have been available at the time. I love him. He keeps popping up in my research because he is like one of the world's foremost Assyriologists. Highly recommend his lectures on YouTube. He's so funny. I love him. I hope he lives forever. So, there's your information on ancient Mesopotamian boats. And we'll talk more about those when we get to Uta-napishtim. Anyway, Gilgamesh agrees, and he goes and gets the planks of wood and even, like, trims and caps them. He really is a Renaissance man. Like, you'd think as king, he wouldn't be good at that much stuff aside from fighting. But he can skin and clean a lion. He can make punting poles. He built a raft. He and Enkidu just straight up built a raft. Like, I respect the amount of skills that Gilgamesh just has. So, they do fix the boat, and with all of these punting poles, he and Urshanabi set sail all by themselves. As usual, they travel supernaturally fast, making the journey that would usually take, according to the text, a month and a half in about 3 days. Again, I did the math. There aren't that many sources on how fast ancient Mesopotamian boats would have been, but I did find some ancient Roman records, so that will have to do. It's only like 3,000 years off. Under favorable conditions, which we will assume because the wind has been very helpful to Gilgamesh so far, if we recall the battle with Humbaba and the 13 winds that were helping them out. Ancient Roman ships could go about 4 knots, which is like 7.4 kilometers an hour, or 4.6 miles per hour, and assuming 24-hour travel for 45 days, a month and a half-ish, that gives us 1,080 hours, so they've traveled almost 5,000 miles or 8,000 kilometers, which is longer than the entire vertical length of South America. At its longest point, they would have to be going about 70 miles an hour or 111 kilometers per hour, which is possible. People only reached that speed record, at least in recorded history, in 1919, but at least it's in the realm of possibility. I'll take it, even if it needs modern technology. Nothing yet, I think, has beat Humbaba's height to scale. Yet. So after 3 days, they arrive at the waters of death, which means now they have to use the punting poles to move. Unfortunately, the water is so deep that they use up all the punting poles and still can't reach the bottom. So, since the punting poles, the ones that are 82 feet long, they use all of them, all 300. And that means that, again, the numbers are different in the translation. The Kovacs translation says that's at least 980 feet or a little over 600 meters of poles. Or in the George translation, 30 miles or 48 kilometers worth of poles, which would give the waters of death a depth over 4.5 times deeper than the Marianas Trench, which is the deepest point in the ocean on Earth. So that's the one that might rival Humbaba's height in terms of sheer, you did not think these numbers through, or I did the math wrong. They still can reach the bottom, and now they're out of punting poles. So, Urshanabi is like, do not put your hands in the water, Gilgamesh, lest they go all Hercules in the River of Souls.
No. Mustn't touch.
Anyway, so he can't put his hand in the water, so instead he just takes off his clothes and holds them up to make a sail. But it works. No word on if he, ran this idea by Urshanabi or if he just started stripping and Urshanabi was like, I guess we're doing it. So he just makes a sail. Gotta do what you gotta do. He is a Renaissance man. They near Uta-napishtim's place. He lives in the Faraway. That's what it's called. because it's so far away from literally everything. Uta-napishtim sees the boat and is like, why is there a random guy on Urshanabi's boat with him? Uta-napishtim is like, who is that dude? Why is he naked? Presumably, it doesn't say he put his clothes back on after he used them as a sail. Anyway, when Gilgamesh gets off the boat, Uta-napishtim is like, who are you and why do you look terrible? And Gilgamesh is like, I know I look terrible, okay? I have good reason to look terrible. My best friend is dead and I'm not okay. I watched him die. I kept his body for over a week because I couldn't stop crying over him, and I only gave him up for burial because his body literally started to rot in front of me. Then I came to find you because you're immortal, and I can't stand the knowledge that someday I will also lie down and not get up. I want to be immortal too. I walked until my clothes fell apart. I killed deer and ibex and hyenas and bears and lions and panthers and tigers and cheetahs with my bare hands. We only heard about the lions in the narrative that we have, but he says he killed all those things and ate them raw. He did eat them raw. I made it through the mountains of Mashu and I crossed the waters of death, and I have overcome every ordeal this journey has thrown at me to come find you. I haven't slept in days. I'm exhausted and sore and full of unbearable grief. I look terrible because the last chapter of my life has been terrible. Uta-napishtim just met this dude. I guess he already knows who he is, though, which, I don't know, he seems to have some supernatural powers. Uta-napishtim looks at him and he's like, you are a king who is 2/3 god. Why are you whining about your life? And look, I think Gilgamesh's pain is valid. Has he done stupid things? Undeniably. Has he been an absolute jerk? I don't think jerk even covers the amount of stuff that he has done selfishly. But his pain is still valid. He's clearly having a rough time. But Uta-napishtim is like, have you considered how lucky you are? You make yourself miserable like this, wandering the wilderness and wallowing. You, who were placed on a throne from birth, who eats the best and freshest of food, who wears the finest clothes, and who has the wisest and most knowledgeable people as your advisors at your beck and call. There are people who eat scraps and wear rags and have no one to talk to or to give them advice. You come out here and wander the wilderness for no reason, tormenting yourself. Gilgamesh, everyone dies. Sometimes it's untimely, and yet, somehow, people go on with their lives. Even though, at any moment, they might die. The gods have established death and life. That's the way it is. So basically, he says the same thing Shiduri told him, but way less nicely. That is the end of Tablet 10. That just ends like that, but don't worry, we have Tablet 11. Tablet 11. Gilgamesh looks at him and is like, for someone who's found immortality, you really don't look like a god. I was all ready to fight you, but you don't seem like much of a fighter. Just tell me, how did you find yourself among the gods with them granting you immortality? And Uta-napishtim is like, I'll tell you my secret. And from there, he recounts the story. Uta-napishtim used to be the king of a city called Shurupak, so old that the gods used to live in it. Except one day the gods decided to send a great flood to destroy all of humanity. Anyone who is familiar with the Christian Bible or the Hebrew Bible or the Quran, pretty much most of the major holy texts from any Abrahamic faith, will probably be familiar with this situation. Not the same one, but this flood myth was around earlier than the story of Noah. For the record, I'm not here to bash anybody's faith or say the Bible is wrong or whatever. I personally am not religious, but if you are, that's cool. It's just a historical note. That's cool. Actually, a lot of ancient civilizations, you might have heard, have flood myths of one kind or another. Tiddalik in ancient Australia, Pacha, what's his name in the Aztec civilization? Pachacuti, that was his name. Deucalion and Pyrrha in Greek mythology. Yu the Great in Chinese mythology. Not every ancient civilization has a flood myth. Uta-napishtim means he who has found life. So there are quite a few flood myths from various civilizations. The oldest one we have actual written evidence of is not Uta-napishtim. The oldest written flood myth comes from around the same time as the oldest records of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Emphasis on around because 5,000 years, things get a little murky. But the actual fragment with some of the story is written in a script from like 1700 BCE, but its protagonist is on one of the Sumerian king lists from about 2000 BCE, which we take the Sumerian king lists with a grain of salt. This king is called Ziusudra, which means life of distant days, or like long-lived one. He's immortal. He wasn't at this point, though. And his story is pretty much the same as the one Uta-napishtim is about to tell. He was also a king of Shuruppak. There's another story, and that one's like Akkadian, of a guy who is also the king of Shuruppak, and his name is Atrahasis, which means exceedingly wise. And I did find like a different version of his story. Still, mostly the same themes, but it just had more detail. It was interesting. And in his story, Atrahasis, the flood part doesn't even happen until like a whole creation myth and all that stuff. It's only after those that the king of Shuruppak who built a boat becomes Uta-napishtim, he who has found life, like I said. There are a few theories, if you were wondering, as to why so many cultures have flood myths. And like sometimes the shifting of Earth's tectonic plates end up thrusting land that was once underwater up onto the tops of mountains, and ancient people were like, yo, look at these shell fossils. This must once have been underwater, so the whole world must have been underwater. Or when the last ice age ended, like all those melting glaciers had to go somewhere because by the time it actually did end, humans were starting to wander. Or some religions believed that there was a divine worldwide flood, which is also what happens in this story. It's not the Abrahamic god, though, it's the Mesopotamian ones. Anyway, so the flood myth that began with Ziusudra. Personally, I think the flood myth that began with Ziusudra has a pretty simple explanation. Just, there really was a flood, not a flood over the whole earth, but a big enough one that the people who saw it would have been like, it looks like the whole earth is covered. But we don't know. They're all dead. We have mentioned, like we said, Uruk at the time, when it was this story, was on the banks of the river Euphrates. A lot of ancient human civilizations were built around rivers because water is important. Without it, you die faster than from the lack of almost anything else except oxygen. And oxygen is in most places in the world, so water was the one you want to find. So a lot of ancient civilizations, the first cities and settlements were built around rivers. A steady source of water is very important. Sometimes rivers flood, sometimes unpredictably. Like, actually, most of the time unpredictably. The Nile flooded relatively predictably, and I think that deserves some credit for, like, all of the success Egypt had. But the Tigris and Euphrates, sometimes they just overflowed. So they're also on, like, relatively flat land as rivers go, which means it's extra easy for them to overflow because the water isn't being pulled very hard in a lot of different directions. If there's too much water, it's like when you pour too much hot water in your cup of tea. It overflows in every direction. When rivers flood, sediment from the water and the river itself is also moved during the flood, and it's left in the area where the flood was. The heavier substances, like clay, aren't carried as far, so, as like the lighter substances. So we can see where rivers flooded, how they flooded, and if they flooded in the same place over and over, we can see evidence of that. We have found, still near these rivers, layers of flood deposits from these ancient floods that through carbon-14 dating, we have been able to make educated guesses, and by we, I mean scientists, not me, have been able to make educated guesses about the floods that made these deposits, when and where and how severe they were, and in the same place that ancient Mesopotamia would have lay by the rivers, we have found deposits that date to like 2800 to 2900 BCE, which is even before Gilgamesh. Like, if he was a real person, he probably would have been alive after that. But this is, according to the king lists, right around the time our flood hero, whatever his name is, might have lived, according to those king lists. And of course, history is very shaky, 5,000 years, but that's why I think that this story might have actually been based on a real natural disaster that happened and then it got mythologized. So, I don't know, just interesting. The flood may well have been so big that the survivors who made it to higher ground still couldn't see anywhere that wasn't flooded. And so they were like, yo, it's the whole world! Can you blame them? Historical disasters aside, the flood account of the Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the most complete ones that we have from ancient Mesopotamia. Some details vary between the stories, but the overall plot is generally the same. And you will also, if you're familiar with the story of the Noachian flood, Noah in the Bible, you will see parallels as well as a few differences in details, but parallels. So, Uta-napishtim, that's who was talking before I went off about ancient floods. Well, I mean, I'm still talking, but like in the story. Uta-napishtim was the king of a city on the banks of the Euphrates called Shuruppak, and he is minding his own business. It doesn't say much about his reign, but I just really hope he was doing better than Gilgamesh in terms of, like, not violating human rights. I get that there weren't really human rights in the same way back then, or really at all, that they had codified like we do now, but I don't know. The bar is not high. Anyway, he is minding his own business. He has no idea that the gods have just decided to wipe out all of humanity. The Epic of Gilgamesh doesn't give a reason, but some of the previous versions that we talked about say that it was because of how noisy the humans were. Some of the gods were like, I cannot sleep. We gotta kill them. I guess they can't really make a noise complaint if you're the gods. The buck kind of stops there, but I still think that seems a little extreme. Anyway, they decide this. In the Akkadian version with Atrahasis, Enlil, who in Akkadian is Elil, pretty close, who was like the god of the air. He is the guy that set Humbaba in the forest. He is also the god of winds and storms, and for a while seems to have even been like the boss of all the gods. Not forever though, I guess. Anyway, he calls all the gods together, and he's like, the humans are so loud. I cannot sleep. We gotta kill them. We gotta kill all of them. All the gods swear an oath not to let the humans know that they're going to kill all of them with a massive flood. But Uta-napishtim's buddy Enki, or Ea in Akkadian, who is the brother of Enlil, and the god of like water and crafts and knowledge, he is very clever. He's like, loophole. He doesn't technically tell any of the mortals. He just talks really loudly to a wall where Uta-napishtim can hear. Like, I assume he just brought Uta-napishtim to his house and was like, stand here, and then went to the other side of the wall and just yelled through it like, oh man, the gods are sending a massive flood over the entire earth. Anyone who wants to survive should put all their resources into building a boat quick, and should also bring enough people and animals on board to preserve knowledge and repopulate later. Too bad none of the mortals know what's gonna happen. This is a lot of news for him, I'm sure. If the mortals did want to stay alive, if they knew the flood was coming and they wanted to survive it by acquiring a boat, well, here's how I think they should build it. He's the god of crafts. He knows how to build a boat. Uta-napishtim is on the other side of this wall like, what do I tell my people? And Enki's like, if a mortal were to build this boat and survive the coming disaster, he should tell the people that Enlil the air god hates him, so he has to go live in the ocean with Enki, and he needs a boat to do that. Seriously though, one should tear down his house for materials if necessary, because otherwise he will drown. Bummer for the mortals. Uta-napishtim gets the message. He gets a bunch of workers and starts building the boat. As usual, the translations are different, but the George translation says that it's about 165 feet or like 50 meters tall. Kovach says 180 feet, so like 54 meters, so close. About as tall as a respectable cruise ship. It has 7 levels from bottom to top. The ancient Sumerians really loved the number 7. We talked about this in Adam and Eve. I mentioned this very story. Anyway, so like 170 foot-ish ceilings, 51 meters. Its area is either an acre or a field, which I'm assuming is like an American football field. I average those out to like 50,000 square feet or 15,240 square meters, which, if my math is right, does work out to around the size of a cruise ship. Not the biggest cruise ship in the world, but a cruise ship. Apparently enough room that Uta-napishtim, his whole family, a bunch of animals, and all of the craftsmen, because they wanted to preserve the knowledge, which I think is solid, and also all of Uta-napishtim's family's gold and silver. Yeah, the beasts of the field and the creatures of the wild. It can fit all of them. It's a pretty big boat. Bigger than they probably would have been able to build in ancient Mesopotamia, but we've established this story is not realistic. Every day, as they're building the boat, Uta-napishtim gives his workers a huge feast. Knowing that their days are numbered, in the Atrahasis version, the day before the flood is due, he again gives the people this massive final banquet and just lets them party it up while he loads his family onto the boat. He himself can't eat or even sit down because of the anxiety that he must be experiencing. It says his heart is breaking in this version. So instead, while the people celebrate and his family boards the boat, he just paces in and out and pukes his guts out. That's what it says. Can you imagine, though, knowing that the apocalypse is coming and knowing that you can't save everyone? Maybe you can't even save anyone. I mean, Uta-napishtim / Atrahasis / Ziusudra saves his family and the craftsmen and the animals. But, also, if the gods are purposefully striking down all of humanity, the boat might not even do any good. If the gods are purposefully trying to destroy all of humanity, they might just see you surviving and strike you down anyway. So, imagine throwing a final party for everyone in your community so you can at least watch them have a last hurrah and hopefully distract them so they can go out happy, watching them celebrate and knowing that tomorrow every single one of them will be dead. Can you blame him for being emotionally distressed? I certainly can't. It's not a fun time for him, but he does it. The boat is built. His family is aboard, so are the craftsmen and the animals. The sky begins to darken. And Uta-napishtim too takes his place on the boat. One of his shipbuilders, Puzura Muri, I think it's pronounced, seals the boat closed. And to him, Uta-napishtim leaves his entire palace and everything in it. For as long as he can enjoy it, I guess. He doesn't know that. At the first light of dawn, black storm clouds begin to roll in. And thus begins the apocalypse. Ninurta, the god of war and agriculture, makes the rivers overflow. Other gods carry out torches and set the land on fire, which I feel like is kind of counterproductive if you're trying to flood it, but I guess they're just... And Adad, who, if we recall, Humbaba was compared repeatedly to Adad, the storm god. It's said that Humbaba's fury was second only to Adad's. Quote, charged the land like a bull on the rampage. He smashed it in pieces like a vessel of clay. What little daylight has had time to show is now overcome completely by darkness. The destruction is so great that the people don't even recognize each other. They're being overwhelmed by the flood, quote, like a battle, like they're being attacked. At this point, even the gods grow frightened at the sheer magnitude of this storm. Even though they themselves started this, they leave the earth and go hide out in heaven, quote, cowering like dogs. And Ishtar screams, quote, like a woman in childbirth. Speaking of childbirth, the goddess of pregnancy and birth, she has like 5 different names. Ninhursag, I don't know. The mistress of the gods, the goddess of delivering babies, quote, whose voice is so sweet, can no longer stay silent, and wails out her grief and horror. She, in many stories, including this one, is the one who created humanity. She screams, what have we done? Quote, no sooner have I given birth to my dear people than they fill the sea like fish. How could I have helped destroy my own children? Yeah, I was asking the same question, but the gods weep with her. They cry until their lips are dry from dehydration. I'm sure they all have terrible headaches. Always drink water after a good cry. During, if you can. Trust me. For 6 days and 7 nights, the storm rages and flattens the land. But when the 7th day dawns, the wind and ocean, quote, that had thrashed like a woman in labor, begin at last to calm. I do think it's interesting how many times elements in this flood story have been compared to the birthing of a child. Renewal of life does seem to be a common theme in the flood myths, especially the ones from ancient Mesopotamia and the ancient Near East in general. I don't know about you. I remember being taught that the Noachian flood in the Bible was the literal baptism of the earth. And again, I don't know about other religions, but Mormon baptism involves like a symbolic act of death and rebirth, resurrection. The baptism thing, it just reminded me of that. And for ancient Mesopotamians, floods kind of were that way. Like, even if they were devastating, they also left behind soil rich with nutrients for crops. So, much like the birth of a child, all of this destruction and pain resulted, in the end, in making room for new life to flourish. Floods, for the people of the ancient Near East, really were a time of destroying the old to make room for the new. Still probably a pretty rough time. Like, I don't think anybody enjoys floods, but if you're gonna look on the bright side, there's the bright side. Anyway, Uta-napishtim, from the boat, hears that the winds don't seem to be raging anymore. He gets up, and he looks out at the world, now quiet and still. He opens a window and feels sunlight on his face. The darkness has receded. Quote, all the people had turned to clay. The kind of clay left, I assume, in flood deposits. Don't think about it too much, it'll get gross, trust me. Now it's Uta-napishtim's turn to weep. Since all this began, he has been under terrible stress. He has spent the last week sealed inside a boat, listening to all of the living things outside drown and die in the terrible storm, not even sure he and his family would survive at all. Probably still isn't. But the worst is over, and they have survived. I can't imagine what he must be feeling right now. Relief and devastation and the weight of now he has to restore the world all at once. He takes a well-deserved moment to collapse to his knees and sob. And then, with tears still on his cheeks, he gets up to look for land. Because the water's still there, the storm has stopped, but there's still a lot of water going on. The boat runs aground on the mountain of Nimush, and the mountain holds it firmly in place. For another week, the survivors stay in the unmoving boat, all wondering, I'm sure, whether the disaster is truly over. I can't think of a lot of things scarier than that. There are things scarier, but that's pretty dang scary. On the 7th day since they landed, so 2 weeks since the storm began, Uta-napishtim releases a dove. The dove finds nowhere to land, so it just comes back. He tries again with a swallow. That one comes back too. Finally, when he tries with a raven, the waters have begun to recede enough that as he watches, the raven finds some food and bobs around as ravens do, and it does not come back. So, he's like, all right, there's enough land now. They get off the boat, and Uta-napishtim offers a sacrifice to the gods, who smell the sweet savor of the offering and the incense and the wood smoke, quote, gathering like flies. I've never heard gods compared to flies before. It's quite a mental image. Nin Harsang arrives and holds up the lapis lazuli necklace that Anu gave her and declares that these beads will be a reminder of these days, that the gods may never forget what happened here. Also, Enlil is not allowed to come enjoy the incense because this apocalypse was his idea. He arrives anyway, though, and he is not happy when he sees the boat and the survivors. He's like, why are there living mortals here? I specifically said we had to kill all of them. I said everything was supposed to die. And Ninurta is like, who do you think would do this and also literally design the boat for them? And everybody looks at Enki. And Enki is like, yeah, Enlil, what were you thinking? Aren't you supposed to be the smart one here? How could you act so foolishly as to try to literally kill all the humans? If you wanted population control, maybe you should have just sent a hungry lion or a wolf or a plague or a famine just to kill off some of them and not all of them. And now look, the last mortals alive aren't even angry with us. Instead, they humbly offer sacrifice. By the way, I didn't break the oath. Uta-napishtim, who at this point in both translations is referred to as Atrahasis, exceedingly wise. By the way, I didn't break the oath. Uta-napishtim overheard me all by himself. I definitely didn't set it up. So, what are we gonna do with him? Who, despite your foolishness, courageously preserved life when we failed. His words seem to reach Enlil, who takes Uta-napishtim's hand, and also Uta-napishtim's wife's hand, and leads them both back onto the boat. And they kneel before him, and he touches their foreheads, and declares that for this great deed, they will now become like gods, and have everlasting life. Uta-napishtim finishes his story, and tells Gilgamesh, so generally, if you want to be immortal, you gotta do something big enough for all of the gods to notice and assemble on your behalf. But since you came all the way out here, I'll give you a chance. Stay awake for the next 7 days. No sleeping for the next week. He's already pretty sleep deprived, but Gilgamesh agrees and sits down to do staying awake for the next week and immediately falls asleep. He is exhausted. I kind of wonder whether Uta-napishtim actually intended to give him eternal life if he managed it, or whether he even could do that. I kind of wonder if this was just meant to demonstrate the difficulty of a task that would attract the attention of all the gods. Because I don't know if Uta-napishtim is even allowed to make people immortal, but he falls asleep immediately, so I guess none of us will ever know. So Uta-napishtim is like, he says to his wife, look at this. He wanted immortality, and he falls asleep immediately. Uta-napishtim's wife is like, he's exhausted. Just wake him up, send him home, let him go back where he came from. But Uta-napishtim is like, you can't trust mortals. He's making a point. It's like, you can never trust mortals. Bake him a loaf of bread every day until he wakes up. Go make one for today and then every day. Line the bread loaves up by his head. I don't know why, because it says that he sits down, so when Gilgamesh has slept sitting up before, he just like put his head on his knees, so I don't know why it's acting like his head is on the floor, but I guess he fell over. He's probably got a thick skull. He's Gilgamesh. Anyway, Uta-napishtim is like, line the bread loaves up by his head and mark each day on the wall, so when he does wake up, he has proof of how long he was out. His wife does. The first loaf is dry, the second stale, the third soggy, the fourth turns white, the fifth gets moldy, but the sixth is nice and fresh. I don't know if they were like this from the beginning. It seems that at least they were like this by the end of the week. The seventh loaf is still in the oven when I guess Uta-napishtim just gets tired of waiting and wakes Gilgamesh up. Gilgamesh is like, whoa, I almost fell asleep. You woke me up just in time. And Uta-napishtim is like, nah, dude, look at the bread. Look at the marks on the wall. My wife baked you bread every day and marked the wall. See, the first one is dry, the second one is stale, the third one is soggy, the fourth one turned white, the fifth one got moldy, and the sixth one is still fresh. The seventh one is still in the oven. You've been out for an entire week. Told you. Gilgamesh, having understandably failed in the task, despairs. What should I do? He asks. Where should I go? Death is everywhere and I can't escape it. Uta-napishtim doesn't answer, but instead calls in Uta-nabi, remember him, and is like, Uta-nabi, you brought this guy here, right? You, being entrusted with the knowledge of this place and how to get here, you took a random mortal guy across the seas to my house. You don't get to come here anymore either. Never come back. You are banished. But first, this man has clearly been having a rough time. Look at him. He's a mess, and those lion pelts do not suit him at all. Show him the bathtub and let him wash. Give him some proper royal robes that will stay fresh and clean until he gets home. Uta-nabi obeys, and Gilgamesh gets a long overdue bath. He takes off the raw lion skins he's been wearing for days and throws them into the sea. Ain't no saving those. And washes his hair and anoints his body with oil, cleans himself up like a king again. He puts on the new royal robes that will stay clean and fresh until he gets home. Magic? I don't know. And he and Uta-nabi head back out to the boat to depart the Faraway forever. I guess Uta-nabi has to go job hunting now. As they're about to leave, though, Uta-napishtim's wife is like, he endured a lot to come out here and see us. What did you give him for the journey home? I think she might just be hinting. And Uta-napishtim is like, yeah, I guess I should give him something. So he goes back out and he's like, Gilgamesh, you endured a lot to come here and see me. So before you go, I'll tell you one more secret. There is a plant that looks like a box thorn, complete with thorns that will prick your hand. If you can get your hands on it, it will allow you to become a young man again. Gilgamesh is all about this. No sooner has Uta-napishtim told him about it than he ties some heavy stones to his feet and just hops into the ocean where the stones drag him down to the bottom so he can get the plant. Uta-napishtim doesn't really tell him where it is, but I guess maybe that part is just lost. He takes the plant and harvests it. I don't know, is it harvesting if you didn't grow it on purpose? He takes the plant and cuts the stones off his feet so he can rise back to the surface. Humans naturally float. It's all that air in your lungs. He gets back to the surface and back on shore. He shows the plant to Uta-nabi. He's like, check this out. This plant will let me regain my youth. I'm gonna bring it back to Uruk and test it on some old guy, and then I'll eat it. I mean, at least he understands the scientific method, or at least he's testing it. I don't know. It says repeatedly that he's the wisest of men, but I feel like maybe we have different definitions of wise. Anyway, he's like, I'm gonna take this back to Uruk, and I'm gonna test it on an old guy, and then if it works on him, I'll eat it and regain my youth too. I call it Old Man Becomes Young. He can name the plant, I guess. Uta-napishtim didn't say it had a name. Uta-nabi is like, all right, and they set off. After 20 leagues, they stop for lunch, and at 30, they set up camp for the night. Which is like, I guess it's different on a boat. But that's slower than they were going towards the cedar forest. Anyway, when they set up camp for the night, Gilgamesh finds a nice cool spring and decides to take another bath. He's got new clothes and new hope. Even if it's not exactly what he wanted, it's better than nothing. And now, he gets to go home instead of wandering in misery. While he's distracted bathing, though, a snake smells the youth plant. Old man becomes young again. It probably sounds better in Sumerian. Anyway, a snake smells the youth plant and is like, ooh, nice. And silently slithers up and carries it off. Gilgamesh looks up just in time to see the snake molt its skin off, taking the renewed youth that was supposed to belong to Gilgamesh and whatever old guy he ended up feeding the plant to. And just like that, Gilgamesh is devastated again. He sits down and weeps, asking Ur-Shanabi, what was the point of all this? What did I struggle and suffer for? I had this one good thing, and the only one it benefited was that stupid dirt creature. I wish I'd never come out here in the first place. But what can they do but continue the journey? Ur-Shanabi doesn't seem to say anything. I don't want to say he's like the emo kid because, you know, I have a certain respect for emo kids. But like, Ur-Shanabi is so unbothered. I don't know if the text it's just lost how he responds to things. But the only time he's shown any emotion is when Gilgamesh literally assaulted him. Even then, he didn't seem that bothered. It's just, I don't know whether to be concerned for, like, his emotional health or admire his unbotheredness. He gets fired, he's like, alright, that's fair. Gilgamesh is, like, weeping, his life is over, and he's like, okay. I need another story about Ur-Shanabi. Too bad everyone that wrote this is dead! But they do continue the journey. Gilgamesh, it seems, has had his fill of wandering. Maybe this is just me. You know, sometimes when you have a little breakdown and you freak out for a bit, and it seems like the world is ending, but then, after you, like, fall asleep or calm down a bit, it's like, oh, I don't know, the world doesn't feel so much like it's ending anymore. That's why I encourage crying. He is happy, it seems, to see his home again. When they arrive in Uruk, he's like, look, Ur-Shanabi, check out my city's wall. Look close. The craftsmanship is incredible, isn't it? This is Uruk. Did not the 7 sages themselves lay out its plan? And the Epic of Gilgamesh ends as it began, talking about how great the city of Uruk is. And that's the end of the 11 tablets of the Epic of Gilgamesh. But I hear you. What kind of ending is that? Did he ever come to terms with the inevitability of death? Was his mom happy to see him again? What kind of ending is that? He gets home. Okay, does he change as a person? I don't have answers to all of those questions, but as for Gilgamesh's mortality, the epic doesn't say, or if it did, that part has been lost. But there is a poem that talks about it. And it's not the poem that's usually counted as like the 12th tablet, because Gilgamesh doesn't actually seem to die in that one. I checked. But there is a poem called The Great Wild Bull is Lying Down. The Death of Gilgamesh. Or Bilgamesh, because that was more of his Sumerian name, but I'm going to keep saying Gilgamesh. It also, at points, spells his name Gilgamesh. This was wild to find. I don't know why so many sources on ancient Sumerian text is, like, part of alien conspiracy theories. And I get it. There's apparently a lot of alien conspiracy theories around ancient Mesopotamian history. I didn't know how much it was. I would be like, how do I pronounce the name of this deity? And I'd look it up, and I'd be like, this is a nice, simple guide. And then the guy was like, and this was the name of the alien spaceship. And look, I'm not saying that I can prove that the Anunnaki, the ancient Mesopotamian gods, like, weren't aliens. I don't know. I was just really surprised by how many sources about ancient Mesopotamian literature were people talking about how they were aliens. So the tablets do end here. The story itself seems to end here, but I found the poem about Gilgamesh's death, and I edited out the spaceship parts. They didn't, like, alter the text. It was just, like, they had some pictures of ancient Sumerian, art and stuff of their gods. And he was like, and this is the one that flew the spaceship. And I was like, okay, thank you. The Death of Gilgamesh. I found it. And I waded through all of the alien conspiracy theories to bring this poem to you now. Also, it's a lot more fragmented. We have one version that was found in Nippur, and one that was found in Meteran. Apparently it shed a lot more light on the thing. Also, we find out some stuff that even I didn't know from the texts itself about the Epic of Gilgamesh. Things that actually happened in ancient Mesopotamia. We don't know whether Gilgamesh was a real person. He might have been. He's on the king list, but he probably didn't do all of this stuff, and I don't think he was 16 or 17 feet tall, but he might have been a real person. Anyway, this is The Great Wild Bull is Lying Down, and it is a narrative about the death of Gilgamesh. It begins, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, with another overview of Gilgamesh's achievements and his strength and his attractiveness, repeating the words, though, Gilgamesh, quote, has lain down and is never to rise again. The Lord of Kulaba has lain down and is never to rise again. He who spoke most wisely has lain down and is never to rise again. When did he speak wisely? Tell me. I did not see it. Not to speak ill of the dead, but anyway, the plunderer of many countries has lain down and is never to rise again. He who climbed the mountains has lain down. He has lain down on his deathbed and is never to rise again. It notes that he is unable to stand up or sit down, unable to eat or drink, and compares him to a trapped fish or gazelle. He is, quote, held fast by the doorbolt of Namtar. Namtar is the son of Ereshkigal, who is the goddess of the netherworld, the afterlife. She's in charge of all that stuff. Namtar's name literally means fate in ancient Sumerian. The very fate that Gilgamesh was trying to avoid. He's kind of like the Mesopotamian Grim Reaper. Like, he doesn't cause the deaths, he's just the dude who picks up the souls. And in addition to acting as a psychopomp sometimes, he is also said to be a demon of disease. Like, some sources say he could dwell inside a human body and cause disease in it. And in this poem, it seems an illness is the very thing taking Gilgamesh's life. Also, the poem says he has no hands or feet. I don't know if, not that someone needs a reason. Sometimes people just don't have hands or feet, and that's okay. They just, fun fact. Anyway, it seems that Gilgamesh was sick for 6 days before he lay down on his deathbed. It didn't even last as long as Enkidu. Then again, we don't know if it's the same illness. I tried to research ancient Mesopotamian medicine. They don't, name anything that we know of. It's just the hand of Marduk. I guess it's all associated with gods. Anyway, one of the sources does repeatedly refer to him as, quote, the young lord. So I'm kind of wondering just how long he had between returning to Uruk and falling terminally ill. It also says that Sisig, the god of dreams and the son of Utu Shamash, the sun god, quote, will provide light for him in the netherworld, the place of darkness. That is, they believed that the afterlife, the netherworld, was dark and gray and dreary. Fun fact, though, about Sisig, his Akkadian name, Zakiku, is part of the name of the Iskar Zakiku, which is a set of tablets with instructions on them about the art of oniromancy, and I mentioned it in my old YouTube video about the science of sleep. So, full circle on that. Not the most happy of poems, but I thought it was cool. Anyway, in a vision on his deathbed, Gilgamesh is lying on his deathbed, and he has a vision. He is standing before an assembly of the gods to be judged, a pretty common theme in afterlife beliefs. They look over his many heroic, or at least impressive, if not super morally admirable deeds, and all the temples to the gods he founded, and that he correctly carried out the rituals to the gods' statues in the temples, because the ancient Mesopotamians built statues of their gods, and they believed that through these statues, the gods could live among them in the physical world. Because of this, they believed the statues were literally their gods. The statues were better taken care of than a lot of humans probably were. They were pampered. They would get daily offerings of food and drink and clothing and jewels. They kept most of it. They had multiple outfits that the priests would dress them up in. I love this. Priests would wake them up in the morning with breakfast and hymns. They would sing them awake with breakfast and dress them in their different outfits and make food for them throughout the day as well. When one of these statues was first made, rituals would be performed to open the mouth and allow it to use its other senses, to cleanse it of the touch of the humans that had built the statue. And it was believed that these rituals brought the statue to life so that the god represented could dwell in as it. So Gilgamesh, as the king, would have been involved in a lot of these religious rituals, if we recall. He said, "We will celebrate the Akitu twice in 1 year," before he left to kill Humbaba. And they never say whether they celebrated the Akitu twice in 1 year. But historically, actually, the city of Uruk did. So if Gilgamesh didn't, somebody did. Because they usually did it twice a year. Anyway, it seems the gods are pleased with his work in making sure that these rituals were carried out correctly. In the council, Enki speaks up, noting that Gilgamesh's mother is a goddess, Rimat Ninsun, the lady of the wild cows. So Enki is like, hey, his mother is a goddess. His father also kind of is, like we said, but he was born mortal, so I guess Enki doesn't think that counts. After Uta-napishtim was given immortality for preserving life from the flood, Enlil reportedly made Enki swear by heaven and earth that no human would ever be allowed to live forever again. Uta-napishtim, that's it. Only him and his wife. But Enki's like, you know, since his mother's a goddess, he's 2/3 god. Could he be made immortal on the technicality that he's not fully human? Gilgamesh doesn't seem to say anything. I can't help but imagine that he can't. Like, it is a dream vision. We all know that Gilgamesh is not afraid to speak his mind and fight people if they have something he wants that they won't give to him. Maybe because it's a dream vision, or maybe just like while you're being judged by the gods, you are not allowed to speak. It kind of makes sense, like, that you are not allowed to charm your way out of your sins if that's a thing you can do. Like, maybe they just want to judge your deeds on merit. Who knows? It is decided, though, that Gilgamesh must have a mortal end after all. I guess 2/3 god is not enough. However, he is appointed a governor in the netherworld. He will, quote, be preeminent among the ghosts, able to make decisions and judgments about other deceased souls. He won't be a full-on king anymore, but he will still have special authority. Quote, he will be counted a companion of the gods, and his words will be counted with the same authority as Ningishida and Dumuzi, who are two of the other underworld gods. Still, it seems this is cold comfort for Gilgamesh. This is what he has feared. Quote, Gilgamesh became depressed when he learns that he must die a mortal death after all. But he is advised that his impending death should not make him feel sad or depressed, because he has been told many times that being human involves death. It then compares death to a few different things: the darkest day of humans, the unstoppable flood wave. Uta-napishtim just woke up in a cold sweat, and finishes with 3 war metaphors: the unequal struggle, the unavoidable battle, and the skirmish from which there is no escape awaits you now, Gilgamesh. It's an interesting comparison, I think. Not to go all English teacher, which I feel like I've kind of been doing that this whole time. It's just an interesting metaphor for someone like Gilgamesh, who is noted to have been victorious in many battles, like every battle ever, even Humbaba. We saw that he was a very successful fighter, to the point that that seems to be the only way he knows how to solve problems. Great for a king. But this poem seems to be making it clear that this is one battle he cannot win. Gilgamesh wakes up from this vision, realizing that it was a dream vision, and he hasn't passed away yet, but he knows that, quote, Namtar with no hands or feet will soon come to take him to the other side. The tablets are damaged here, but it seems that he might, call for his advisors and recount the dream to them, maybe looking for support. I'm sure he's frightened. And he's told, quote, you should not go to the underworld with heart knotted with anger. The Matron version also assures him that he will be with his loved ones again, that in death he will see his, quote, precious friend, his companion, Enkidu. He is also told that, quote, your jewel will come to meet you, your precious one will come to meet you. I don't know who that might be, because they already mentioned Enkidu, and I'm pretty sure his favorite person besides himself is Enkidu. But his advisors seem to remind him that all men must die, even kings. And that even when he's dead, he's gonna be better off than a lot of people. So, again, we don't know how he felt. In the end, I would like to believe that Gilgamesh came to terms with his own mortality, that his final days were as painless as they could be, that he was able to say goodbye to his family with grace and be at peace. But we don't know for sure unless more tablets come to light, and they are still looking for them. They are still finding them. So really, it's up to you to decide how you feel. But Gilgamesh sets about building his tomb, which is unsurprisingly lavish. Even Utu/Shamash admires it. He's like, that looks nice. Gilgamesh has workers literally divert the course of the Euphrates River so that his tomb can be built in the riverbed. Even by modern standards, that's not an easy task. Then Gilgamesh presents gifts to Ereshkigal's court, just like he did for Enkidu, in the hopes that he and his entourage will receive a nice welcome to the netherworld. Yes, I said entourage. Gilgamesh will not be the only one laid to rest in this tomb. In the 1920s and 30s, there was this archaeologist called Leonard Woolley. He's from Britain, and he excavated the ancient city of Ur. Not Uruk, Ur, different ancient Mesopotamian city. It's still ancient Mesopotamian city. And in excavating the city, he found almost 2,000 graves. This was the royal cemetery of Ur. I don't know if he called it that, but that's what people seem to call it a lot. Royal, because 16 of these almost 2,000 graves stood way out for how very, very fancy they were. It seems that when rulers died, I mean, we don't know for sure that they were kings and queens. Woolley was pretty sure they were, and we found, like, evidence, some of them have names of people that we know were rulers. It seems that when these extremely rich and important people died, they wanted to take servants with them. So, instead of, doing the terracotta army thing, they brought people who were not already dead. They brought people with them to the afterlife. I mean, I guess we don't know for sure that they were taken to the afterlife, but they believed that they were. People were buried with them. The excavators found tombs full of gold and jewels. Like, they all thought you could take it with you, so they would pile up the wealth for them in the afterlife and to gift the underworld gods in hopes of good treatment there. But also a bunch more bodies. One of the sites, the largest one, Woolley called them death pits because there were just skeletons lined up like they're taking a nap in a nap room or something, just in neat rows. The most they found in one grave was 74 bodies. 74 people. Maybe 73, because one of them might have been the person that was already dead. 73 people sealed in the tomb with the deceased person. Most of them very finely dressed, probably way better clothes than they could have afforded in life, because it seems like most of them were commoners. There was no sign of a struggle, or if there was a struggle, they were repositioned after. They're all just lying peacefully in the tomb, curled up, as the ancient Mesopotamians often tended to bury their dead. Like, it's a pretty common theme, I think, in preparing a body for burial, that we want them to just look like they're sleeping peacefully. But in those days, they would bury them curled up, whereas we usually bury people on their backs. They would, have them curled up in the fetal position, which that's how I sleep, so if I die, that's how they should bury me. Anyway, they should. I can't sleep on my back. It's really uncomfortable. Anyway, they're just lined up. Some of them lay next to instruments. Some of them had makeup, not just on them. I mean, they're skeletons. They don't have the skin anymore. But they had, makeup containers with makeup still in them, apparently. Some of them had what seemed to be dishes for food. One woman was still holding a ribbon that was probably meant to go in her headdress. Like, she was late or something. Relatable, honestly. But we're not sure how they died. Some of them had cups with them that some historians have theorized might have held poison to end it before they could just die of dehydration or whatever. A few of the skulls have been examined, and they found evidence of, heavy blunt force trauma. So some people think that maybe the cups held a sedative so they'd be unconscious before they were clubbed or strangled to death to prevent damage to the outside of the body. Or they might just have been clubbed. Who knows? We don't know if they were willing. Maybe they thought that by being a servant to this very high-ranking person in the afterlife. They would be assuring themselves of a better afterlife than they would have had if they were just buried with what little they owned. They are dressed in way better clothes than they probably could have afforded in life. Maybe they were forced. Or maybe they really did love the deceased so much that they just went with them. Whatever the reason, like all those found in the royal cemetery at Ur, Gilgamesh passes. And his people mourn in traditional Sumerian fashion, loudly and publicly. And that probably would have comforted him too, as it did Enkidu when he was dying, to know that he would be missed. I wonder if his mom participated, like, as a goddess. Is she still going to do that, or does she kind of do her own thing? Then again, she can probably go see him anytime she wants, because the netherworld is not usually closed to gods the same way it is to mortals. But the poem ends saying, "The names of the dead, once uttered, do not sink into oblivion. Ninarsang provides them with offspring for that purpose." Because traditionally, the children of the deceased, their oldest son, usually, traditionally, was the one who brought food and drink to the dead in that caring for the dead ritual, if you were not there for that. Ghosts were not supposed to leave the underworld, but sometimes Ereshkigal would give them permission if they were not being honored properly. They believed that ghosts could enter the body through the ear and bring about bad luck or sickness or even death. It's like, ha, now we're in the same boat. Should have brought me that cake. Also, though, because they loved them, they honored them, they remembered them. And what Gilgamesh wanted most from the beginning, what he wanted most was to establish a legacy. We don't know the real Gilgamesh's feelings on death, if he existed at all. But if, like the Gilgamesh in this story, he coveted remembrance, I hope he can see from the afterlife how widely his story has spread. The oldest story ever written. That's an achievement. And he probably didn't even do anything to write the story, because he was probably dead before it was written. Y'all know my feelings on humans and stories. How better to be remembered than through stories? What better way to honor those who have gone before than by remembering what was special about them, what was important to them, by telling their story, like Hamilton. Someday we will all be stories. May all of ours be worth telling. That is the end of the oldest story ever written, the Epic of Gilgamesh.